Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
So this episode is our holiday episode. We're going to be talking about Frozen 1 and 2, double feature for you all. And we also have an excellent guest today. We have Dr. Shelly Clevenger. She is the department chair and associate professor for the Department of Victim Studies at Sam Houston State University. This is the first and only department in the nation, and it is devoted entirely to the study and assistance of victims. She's also authorized several books on topics such as victimization, gender, and cyber victimizations. She also has won many national awards for teaching and research in these areas. And before entering academia, she worked with children who had experienced sexual and abuse and problematic behaviors. So if you want to, Shelley, jump in and say, hey.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan, so I'm excited to be here.
We're a big fan of you as well. Shelley, you do a lot of also talking at panels at conventions like C2E2 and things like that. And that's where we got to know you.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I was super excited to meet you all.
Yeah, same. We kind of run in the same nerdy circles, I would say.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
So today in talking about Frozen, we're going to be talking about confidence and empowerment, anxiety and attachment, and as always, treatment and final thoughts. So for the few people who have been living in like caves who have not experienced Frozen or Let It Go or something like that, I'll give a brief synopsis. So it's about two sisters, Anna and Elsa, who are princesses of Arendelle?
Yes.
Arendelle in Norway.
Yes, you know, that Lord of the Rings episode we just did really flexed all my muscles in terms of made up names and locations. And Elsa discovers at a young age that she has magical powers that are related to snow and ice. At some point, she accidentally harms her sister Anna while they're playing. And then because of that, her parents sort of keep her locked away in a room and keep her and Anna separated for the entirety of their childhood and adolescence. When they are in their late teens, early 20s, their parents die and in a shipwreck, and Elsa gets elevated to the throne, and things ensue based on her fact that she hasn't really learned how to use her powers and grow with her powers. And until she learns to let it go, she can't really self-actualize, which is what we'll be talking about today. So I've kind of already touched upon it so far just in with discussing the synopsis, but what made empowerment and self-actualization and that kind of topic come to our minds when watching this movie?
For me, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Ben. No, you go ahead.
Okay.
So eager. I love it.
That's why we got Shelley, because she's awesome. But the thing that sticks out to me the most in this movie is watching someone go through life with this assumed identity and being forced to keep a secret and contain an entire part of herself away from the world because she's been taught that it's going to make her dangerous to those that love her and dangerous to her kingdom. And we get to see her go on a journey where she is forced into a situation where she can no longer contain who she is and can no longer conceal it and keep it secret, and has to go through this journey of accepting and embracing and then learning to use this perceived weakness as a strength. And for me, I think that's what the enduring part of this story is and why it's been so popular, particularly among young girls, is that there aren't enough stories out there that show a girl or young woman embracing what makes her unique and powerful and growing into it and with it and using it as a strength despite being told something different her whole life.
Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead, Shelley.
Similarly, I would say related to that, we all feel different at some point. And I think as kids, it would have been great for me to have Elsa, which I often think about, like me growing up. It would have been great to have that sort of female who like struggled with her identity. And then she does sing on a mountaintop, right?
She sure the fuck does.
She's going to be somebody else. Because as kids, depending on who you are, your circumstances, you might feel isolated and alone and like you can't be yourself. And I think Elsa gives everyone, but particularly young girls, the ability to be themselves and to let it go.
How many times are we going to squeeze "Let It Go"? I've already done it into this episode. I heard you say "conceal it," Ben, and that kind of triggered it also in my brain. I'm going to
say "Let It Go" into the unknown at least 7 times.
I'll save it for final thoughts. I was about to say something, but I'll save it for final thoughts. I think in watching this movie again as a therapist, and especially like the beginning piece, it really resonated for me how when you can grow up in a family system where you are different, whatever that means. My history, as everyone knows listening to the podcast, is a child therapist. And I used to work with families a lot, specifically of young children who are struggling, and how it can feel like this need to almost prioritize your children in the sense, especially if you have, I think one thing I noticed was, what really resonated with me was in the beginning of the movie when Elsa accidentally harms Anna, like pretty badly, as we see, like she has to get, it's almost fatal, and how the parents' recourse for that is to kind of shut everything down. We're going to shut it down with your powers. We're going to erase that part of your identity with your sister. We're going to keep you guys pretty separate. And they don't really encourage Elsa. It does seem like Elsa does a lot of her own self-isolating, like she really doubles down on it, but parents don't encourage it. We don't see parents encouraging her to not do that. And I think I see that a lot with parents I've worked with, and not because I think they're bad parents or anything like that. It's just, it's so scary when you have I think it can be so scary when you have a child whose behavior, though it might not be their fault, is endangering your other child. And I've definitely had parents who have said to me, I feel like I have to choose which of my children's safety to prioritize, and that I kind of have to they don't use these terms, but like sacrifice one of my children to protect the other. And that's such a heartbreaking space to be in as a parent. You obviously never want to do that. And it can feel, especially if your child's behaviors feel really dangerous, it can feel like you have to do that. And so watching that felt really heartbreaking as a child therapist, to see them make that decision and then continue to unfortunately encourage that decision without fostering Elsa's ability to manage it. Because also what's different when I've done this therapy in the past and something similar has come up is then my role as a child therapist is to help these parents develop the ability to coach their child through managing the behaviors that feel really dangerous. And what we don't see in this movie, unfortunately, is what we do see is a total avoidance of the thing that is scary. And there's no encouraging and empowering Elsa to have control over this behavior and to feel like she can be a safe person again.
And to piggyback on that, what I think sticks out to me is watching Elsa's interaction with Anna when she's able to do the magic and they're able to build the snowman. And that's such a powerful part of their dynamic where I think Anna encourages it and like laughs, and it makes Elsa feel special and like a very important big sister role that gets taken away from her. And we don't see, it's implied, I guess, we don't see much of the parents because Disney does their thing and kills the parents in the first 5 minutes of the movie.
They love to kill a parent.
God,
they
every
really
time,
do.
Every time. But they make billions of dollars, so I guess it works. But the thing that we see over this movie is that it's implied that Elsa doesn't get an opportunity to feel special and relate to Anna in a way that makes their relationship feel warm and comfortable ever again until she's able to really embrace herself. And that doesn't even happen until the second movie. Like she starts warming up to it by the end of the first movie.
No pun intended.
Pun absolutely intended. You just have to let it go when that happens, Brittany.
Everybody take a drink when we say that.
Right?
But like watching that, you see Elsa gets traumatized watching her sister get injured by her magic.
Mm-hmm.
And then the memory gets removed from Anna entirely.
Yeah.
And Elsa and the family, everyone else still knows what happens, but Anna has no idea. And she's just this little light, so sure of who she is, so confident and happy and bubbly. And there are people like that. But for Elsa, it has to be so hard to have learned so early how fragile life is. And that her accident was the cause of her sister almost dying. And now she can't even talk about it or connect to it. We don't know if the parents set up a side dynamic for her to talk with Anna about it, but she's going to withdraw because she's scared. And like seeing all of that play together really sets up Elsa as a tragic character that has to go through all this growth to become who she does later.
Yeah, and I feel like just something to point out in general is that a lot of times when a family is avoiding something, whatever it might be, a lot of times that has a big impact on the sibling relationships because there's a piece missing or there's something that isn't shared. And in this example in the movie, they're completely separated from each other. Part of the reason why we see Anna with such yearning so much for connection to anyone is because she's been alone. She's literally been alone. Like she was with her parents sometimes, but never had that sibling relationship. And also because it wasn't talked about, it was never, like she also has this kind of blank, like kind of when we talk about when something tragic happens in a family, and if it's not talked about or processed, then the person comes up with their own reason why, right? Which is what we see not only for Anna, but also for Elsa, because I think Elsa has to kind of create her own narrative as well. And I don't know, I mean, I assume her parents still spent time with Elsa, but I don't know, like they seemed so afraid of her, and how scary that would be as a kid to have parents who were afraid of you.
Well, and right, that's the whole point of do you want to build a snowman? That's what it's showing us.
Yeah.
It's that we used to be so close and now I don't see you anymore. So it's Anna lamenting all of the things that they used to do together and feeling lonely and sad, particularly as their parents die. Like this is like the second song of the movie. So we go through Frozen Heart, which is, Disney's like little clever way of letting you know something is going to happen. But then the second song of the whole movie is watching this family get destroyed. Because all of that action takes place in between the stanzas of that song. And we see that exact dynamic play out. And it's something you see in families when there's a secret and one kid is old enough to remember it and the other kid isn't, and they're going to grow up not knowing the impact of it and everyone else is still feeling it.
Yeah, I find Frozen 1 to be really depressing in a way that I don't find Frozen 2. Like, I like Frozen 2 better. As someone who has a young child, I've seen Frozen 1, probably over 100 times. And I still feel sad watching it, but Frozen 2 feels happier in sort of that way because it doesn't have all the childhood trauma. It has its own childhood trauma, but the separation between the girls, I always find to be one of the hardest. To build a snowman, I always think is such a sad song.
Yeah, especially, I mean, we haven't even really talked about it, but the fact that they're royalty, so there's another layer of isolation as well, and the fact that they're not like amongst the commoners, I guess is how I'd put it, in that they're like locked in this gigantic castle, a huge house, basically. They don't really have peers. They're not like bopping around their neighborhood, like seeing what the kid next door is doing. And they're isolated by their status as well, in the sense of they are going to be someone one day. They already are someone, kind of. And so it just, to be quite frank, I felt really angry at the parents watching Frozen this time around. I can find empathy for why they do this. And dialectical thinking. And I felt really disappointed by how poorly they prepared both their daughters for life as an individual and also for life as a royal person. You know, eventually, like, Elsa was going to become the queen. What was the plan? And you are already prepping a child who is so disempowered just by who they are as an individual. And then you also want them to be the highest authority in the land one day. And like, those two things don't match up. And I think it is a good example of how much our fear and anxiety can dictate our choices when something is happening that just scares us so deeply. I mean, we see that through, like I said, in real life all the time, you know, something scary, we don't talk about it. And then, like, I think Ben and Hannah, maybe you both mentioned is, you know, I want to say children, but also adults do this as well. We fill in the blanks of what has happened, you know, if we don't know what's happened. And then typically, because we're all egocentric, we fill in that blank with ourselves. I must have done something wrong. And you can see that with the snowman thing as well, that Anna thinks she must have done something wrong to Elsa. And then Elsa obviously thinks that she's done something wrong because she's saw something go wrong and then was told something went wrong. And there was never really that, like, sometimes how I phrase it, and I think how it's called when something like quote unquote bad happens, is like, seems you have to repair work, which is like, we talked about debriefing. We've talked about that, I think, in the last episode too. And that was just missing in this factor, which is the repair work. And I guess I could have found more forgiveness for the parents if they had died like 6 months after this happened. They died like 15 years after this happened. Like, they had like over a decade to figure this out, and they did it. And I know we kind of find out in Frozen 2 that they might have been hiding, you know, cultural, you know, backgrounds and maybe, you know, shame and fear around cultural things since mom, you know, I guess if we want to think about like this, you know, Aunt Elsa has inherited something from the mom side of the family, and there can be, you know, there can be fear that as too of like, there's something wrong with my lineage and now I've passed it along to my child and I can't deal with that. So I'm going to shut it down and disempower that part, thinking that you can sort of pick and choose where you disempower your children. You can't really, like, that they're a whole being. Yeah.
And I also wish that they would have had an Alfred, like a person.
A daddy butler, as I like to say.
It just would have been there.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever, a guest brought up Batman before Ben. Go ahead, Shelley.
I'm just saying, like, not that Alfred solved all the problems of Bruce Wayne, but he, you know, at least helped him, like, cope. And there was like a parental figure. I felt like they didn't have anybody.
Well, they didn't have a guide. Like, Alfred Nothing Else is like a wax on, wax off sort of like mentor, but also like a unconditional caretaker. And they didn't have that. They were just kind of left. I mean, which I guess doesn't really make sense given their position as well. You think they'd have a little guy who would coach them through being a royal, if nothing else. Like, okay, you're a dignitary. You got to do this. You got to do that. That's who this person is. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever watched Veep. He needs like that little Tony Hale that's like behind their ear telling them who everybody is at these big galas. And so it makes sense that when Elsa becomes queen and emerges into public life, she almost immediately at that ball or gala or whatever has a full-on
coronation.
Her coronation. Yeah, she's a full-on, I guess, fit, like a full-on, like, that she had a panic attack, or that she the first thing into royal life, of course, she would flip out because she has no regulation skills.
Right. Based on what you're saying, Brittany, I think the thing to add into that is looking at what Elsa is going to be or was faced with upon taking over that throne is no one prepared her for the fact that you are going to be dealing with trauma being thrust in your face, that the loss of your parents is now as complete as it possibly could be because you're replacing them now. You are replacing mom as the matriarch of the family and taking over the role. And that would have been extremely difficult. We see people struggle with that all the time. The first holiday you have after grandma passes away, where you start to take over the role of being the head of the family. You see people struggle with that loss all the time, and her going through this and then having all of these vultures show up, like
yeah, I know what you mean.
Particularly that one Duke who does his weird chicken dance while his hair flops around. You see her struggling so much just to manage herself, and you remember, like, she's just a teenager.
She's 21, actually. I looked that up because I was curious about that. Because I was like, coming of age, what does that mean? She's 18, she's 16, 21, which I was like, okay, it's a little less bad, I guess. Then, but
a 21-year-old me thought a lot of things that were not true, and believed a lot of things about myself that were proven incorrect.
Your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25. So the joke I like to make with parents is that when they make jokes like, well, my kid's just doing such stupid stuff, I'm like, yeah, because they're stupid. Like, they're going to be stupid until they're 25. Like, that part of your brain that makes you less stupid doesn't fully develop until you're 25. So we got to give them some like breathing room about that.
And if they're male, 33.
No, I refuse. I mean, I get it. And also I refuse to accept that.
As a resident male, I assure you, hanging out with other men under the age of 33, we're morons until our back starts hurting and punishing us for the stupid things that we do.
Oh my God.
I'm telling you.
No, but I think in just watching it too, whenever I watch something like this, when people are in power, just the stress of that role as well, that alone would give me a panic attack. And so then putting that on top of hiding something about yourself, and then also not even knowing who you are, period, point blank, and feeling confident about that. Like, it's just a recipe for disaster. And it is such a genuine shame that her parents don't have the capability to prepare her better for that.
No, she's just got essentially the major domo there to the bigger guy, the bald guy. They have some court official or who's obviously been guiding them in some way, shape, or form, and kept the traditions and that role alive. So I guess they sort of have an Alfred who's less emotionally connected.
Well, they should have made him more prominent.
Yeah,
I think he shows up a little bit more in the second one, but he's around, and you can see that they've had somebody guiding them to be proper, and that you have to do this, and this is how you do that, and this is how you manage this, but all with the expectation that she already knew this stuff, and ignoring the emotional stress that she would be under. And we see her crack right away under that, especially once the one person she would have been looking for stability gets angry with her, and they have that fight. Cause that's when Elsa really comes loose. Is like, she's trying to essentially parent Anna's ridiculously terrible decision to like, I sang a song with Prince Hans and he's cute, so now we're engaged. And like,
and that was Anna being, Elsa being sort of confident and empowered when she was like, I'm not gonna, like, check off that decision. That decision is buck wild. Like, she was like, what are you talking about? But I think because they don't have the foundation of a sibling relationship, they can't really have that kind of conflict yet.
No, they don't have any dynamic for it. And now Elsa is just assumed the role. So as the 21-year-old, you're going to try to mold yourself into the role that's laid out for you, because that's the only way you're going to have to make sense of the world and not understand that there's still the nuance of the relationship. And just because you stepped into a new role doesn't mean everybody grants you the title of king shit, even though you are. Like, you get a job as a manager straight out of college, and you expect a 45-year-old employee who's been there for 20 years to respect you. Like, you better dream on. They do that with the military too. Like, a 22-year-old kid comes out of officer training school as a second lieutenant and is expecting a 50-year-old sergeant to call him sir and listen to his orders. And there's some dynamic problems there. And you see Elsa and Anna haven't even had years of military conditioning and work history structure to understand who's the boss and what that means. They're trying to navigate that at the same time and having a major struggle that Elsa is feeling herself just barely manage her anxiety, that everyone will see her secret. And then the one thing that could destabilize her does, and poof, panic attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's genuinely like white knuckling it. And then she does what she's been taught to do, which is avoid. So she immediately runs away and isolates herself, which is unfortunately how her parents showed her to manage crisis. Is you have to isolate yourself. You have to, and without thinking about the fact that she can't do that anymore because she is the queen of the whole kingdom. Like, she can't run away, which obviously instigates the whole plot, or the rest of the plot of the movie. And even the second one too, she kind of does a similar thing, which is she runs. And I know in the second movie, it's more because she's being called to literally to do something and go somewhere. But I think it still says a lot about her coping style, which is to flee and to not think about the impact of others on her fleeing, because also she was informed indirectly growing up that people are better off without her. So it probably doesn't even occur to her the vacuum that she's leaving or the negative impact of her running off, in both movies.
Well, and remember, she doesn't run off necessarily by choice. She has to. They're these foreign invader, essentially dignitaries who are trying to sneak in to seize upon trade power and take control of a kingdom that is seen as vulnerable and laid dormant for a while, which probably is more Shelley's area than me, honestly, but the criminology of that. But the seeing these people all of a sudden label her as a monster. Like, she's not just running away from choice. She has now been labeled a monster, a freak, a danger to everyone. And all of a sudden, all these people that were there to turn on her, that she's been able to wall off and keep out, are now in her space and attacking her. They are shooting at her.
Yeah.
It's not just like she said, nope, fuck this. I don't want to be part of this. Like, nah, see y'all later. This is too much pressure. No, they're trying to kill her. And then she sheds herself from all of those roles and actualizes. And you see her like throw off the dress and go through the cold never bothered
Put her
me
hair
anyway.
down.
Right.
Let her hair down.
I don't need to wear all these warm clothes and mask who I am anymore. Like, there's a lot of reasons why she's become an LGBTQ icon, and people were thinking that is Elsa a metaphor for someone accepting their sexuality? And maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of one mind, Ben, because I was also thinking in the second movie, it does have this feeling of someone, I think I wrote in my notes, like looking for their community. A big drive, it feels like to her in the second movie is, I am looking for a reason behind who I am and a purpose behind who I am, and also wanting to find people where I feel seen. I think that's a big driving force in the second movie of, I want to find people like me. And that is such a, almost like one-to-one analogy for, being like different, whatever that means. If that is like LGBTQ plus community, I think that part was really poignant. And it also makes me think of what you had brought up before we started recording, Shelley, so I can kind of throw it to you, is I think also the sense with the purpose finding of everyone else knows what they're doing and I don't. So I have to find the thing that tells me what I'm doing so that I can meet everyone else where they're at.
Yeah, I was saying before we started recording that as adults, I always thought adults knew what they were doing and that they had the answers. And now that I am an adult, turns out that's not true. And thinking about Frozen 1 and Frozen 2, I think both Anna and Elsa are doing those things. And that for me, I always really liked Anna. I know Elsa is the sort of hero and she has the superpowers, but Anna for me always seemed like she was searching for somebody to love her, almost like a shelter animal. And I don't mean that derogatory. I just mean she really wanted someone to love her and she wanted to feel like she fit somewhere too. And so, I always love when I see little girls dressed up as Anna and not Elsa, because I was like, they maybe identify with that, like wanting to feel loved, wanting to feel accepted, and not being the star. Because Elsa's the older sister.
Yeah.
She's the queen. She's the one with the power. So I always liked Anna too, because she was kind of in the shadow a little bit. But yeah, we never know what we're doing, whether we're the Annas or the Elsas as being adults.
All right. I think I agree. I think watching this story, I always felt that Anna is the real hero of it. Like Elsa's, embracing her identity and these, genetic gifts that she's gotten from the universe and rising to the power and wearing the cool dresses. And Anna is more traditionally dressed and blends in more, but her unrelenting optimism and connection and positivity really is what drives the story. And I just realized that Anna is Samwise.
That's very cute. He is my fave. And I think that slides beautifully into our next topic, which is anxiety and attachment. I think exactly what you were saying, Shelley, is that Anna does demonstrate someone who has more of what I would consider an anxious attachment style. And that can look, and I think the way that that's very prominently displayed is with the Hans relationship. She meets this guy. She feels seen by him within minutes because he's being deceptive, and immediately is in love with him, quote unquote, in love with him, was willing to marry him. And when you have like anxious attachments, you can become, secure attachment is exactly how it sounds. You have appropriate attachment to other people. It kind of goes at a speed that makes sense and healthy. And when someone has an anxious attachment, it can either be like a little more avoidant, or it can be like we're seeing with her, which is a little bit more like overly intimate and dependent. And because with Anna, she loses that relationship with her sister so swiftly and so mysteriously to her. And that never gets, it seems like it never gets explained to her and processed for her. Then how could she not carry that into adulthood, where she is, like you were saying, so much striving for a connection and for someone to see her and want to be around her? And I think that is what Hans feeds on, which is, unfortunately, Anna experienced not wanting to be around because of Elsa. And so it's so seductive when someone is so interested in us. And I think I hear this a lot, not to bring it into like modern day adulthood, but I'm, as I think I've said on here before, I'm like rampantly on TikTok, and a lot of people who are talking about modern dating on TikTok talk about attachment styles. And I think the way that you can see it in like modern dating, to bring this into the real world, is if you're talking to someone and they're like love bombing you, they're like, I like texting you all the time, and they are like using pet names really quickly, and like this really overly intimacy, which can be really seductive and powerful if you also have an anxious attachment. And it usually connotes that it's false intimacy. And with Hans, it's definitely false intimacy because he's a straight up fucking liar. But it makes it like, as soon as like the song and her when they're married, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like watching it again, I was like, Anna, girl, like I know you want to feel love, but baby girl, like this is wild. But makes total sense looking at it through attachment styles.
It does make total sense.
It does. And I would say, watching that, a lot of adult women are probably like, oh, I've met a Hans before.
Yes. Someone who sweeps you off your feet and says all the right things and makes you feel loved in all the ways that you didn't think. And then probably, like Hans, dips.
Yep. That whole like pump and dump that the narcissists do to people.
Pump and dump.
Oh my God.
I like to say smash and dash.
Yep. I know there's an actual term for it that always forgets, but they pump you so full of this
love bombing,
optimism and love and confidence, and then they take it away so suddenly, and there's no explanation for it. There's no like reason. It's just all of a sudden, nah.
Which unfortunately feeds into the narrative that many people have of like, I've done something wrong, I'm unlovable. And so with Anna, what is great for Anna is that as the Hans thing happens, she is developing her attachment with her sister and with like other people, Kristoff. Like she's widening her support system simultaneously. So she has that cushion to fall on when the Hans thing occurs so that she's not repeating the Hans situation. Though in Frozen 2, you do see her anxious attachment pop as well. And sort of this hypervigilance around Elsa, which is earned. You know, I don't want to act like Anna's just running around acting bonkers. She has good reason because she does say like, Elsa, you keep running off, you keep doing dangerous things. Like you might not be scared for you, but I'm scared for you. And you can't keep doing this. And so we do see Anna, like almost wanting to like lay on top of Elsa, like sit on her like that in that movie to keep her safe and there.
And also one of the greatest moments of Frozen 2 that I always bring up is when Kristoff says to Anna, what do you need? Or like, how can I help you? Like, that is a great, for me, moment in Disney history where he didn't try to like take over something. He was like, how can I support you? Which I think is good relationship modeling.
1,000%. Because what he's doing most of that movie with the proposal stuff, and this is exactly what I talk about in couples counseling. So thank you, Shelley, is stop trying to guess what your partner needs and ask them what they need. Because when the part of the entire idea of guessing is you might be right, you might be wrong. And you have to deal with the gamble of that. And so he's like guessing all these extravagant proposal scenarios and doing kind of his own thing, really, and not checking in with her about what's going on with her. But not to get sidetracked, there's a lot of both of them feeling really anxious about the state of their relationship, especially in the second one, when you think they'd be more secure.
I think for Anna, it makes sense. She just went through I looked up the phrase so that I would say it appropriately and not say pump and dump, which also refers to when women who are breastfeeding decide that they want to have, a life. But the idealization and devaluation process that they put you through, where she just went through that, and now she's not even sure, like who she is or how she can connect. I've had clients that have had this happen to them where they get really, really distressed about who they are and who they can be and what's real and whether someone relating to them is being authentic or not. And so when Elsa's sleeping in the back of his sleigh and you see her wagon, I guess, at that point. Yeah, right. When Kristoff and Anna are talking to each other and he's trying to propose and he's bumbling around through his speech and saying things, and she just keeps latching on to every opportunity to hear something that's dismissive and reacts to it and then starts asking questions so much that they both get flustered and can't get through where the conversation is going. But I think that seeing that makes sense for what just happened to her.
And also, I think there's a bit of that too when you lose parents pretty young. I think there's also a bit of Anna wanting to. I think the quote I wrote down was, I was so desperate to protect her. And so I think also there can be that taking on a bit of like parental roles with each other because you don't have that person there. And so that is also another layer of, I think, anxiety on Anna, that she's a bit overcompensating for the lack of parents and like an authority that keeps you safe.
Right. And then she's knowing that she's more vulnerable to that now for having that thrust in her face for how catastrophically the relationship with Hans failed. Like you see her struggling with that, like now being a little bit older and having some awareness of it, going like, oh man, I do attach to people. I am needy. Uh-oh. How do I manage that? Wait, are you saying you don't want to be, who am I? Is basically who am I and are you safe? And seeing her struggle with like that knowledge that I do have attachment issues, even if I don't have words for them, I'm understanding that I'm not okay. I'm watching her struggle with that for the majority of this movie, which is why they separated for Frozen 2, why they started separating Elsa and Anna, and they each had their development arc. Instead of Anna needing to be the one that got rescued, which her being rescued by her sister was also a fantastic choice.
I know.
By Disney, not Kristoff rushing to do it, but it's the love of her sister that unfreezes her.
I mean, it is such an interesting story in the sense of siblings too that are so getting to know each other as well. Like in the second movie, I think there's still a sense of them almost like still in the newer stages of trusting their relationship and who they are to each other and feeling insecure about their bond. And it is kind of, the more I talk about it, it's just like heartbreaking because they've lived in the same house their whole life. Yeah. And it's not like Elsa got sent away to live with Merlin or some shit. Like in the Arthur tales, like they grew up together technically, and they're so tentative, I think is what the word I'm looking for, with each other as adults, which happens, especially if you, like we've talked about already, kind of gone through traumatic childhoods, getting to know each other again as adults is like a brand new relationship. Mm-hmm. And so these movies are doing a lot of, I don't give them enough credit, I think is what I'm saying out loud right now, is that they do a lot of interesting stuff a lot of atypical Disney stuff. And it is interesting. It is kind of nice. I was debating about is Frozen 2 dumb, the existence of it, because no other Disney movies have sequels like that. Like they do have the standard Christmas straight to video. But I do think it is nice to see more of the fully fleshed development of their relationship and kind of almost the full arc of each story individually and then together. So is there anything else? I know, Hannah, you've had some technical issues for anyone who's wondering why she's been a bit quiet this episode. Mm-hmm. Also, Hannah's been really sick this week, so I want to give her some grace. Is there anything else about attachment or anxiety that you want to speak on before we move on?
I think one of the things that I was thinking about was that I know that you guys have been talking about Anna in terms of her attachment, but also thinking about her also growing up in a family where her parents' anxiety is kind of what she sees and kind of how, and we just avoid it, or we like there isn't really a way to handle it, which I think we kind of were talking about before in terms of having coping skills and kind of, being in a place where you can learn that, or even when you have people around you who have awareness that they are acting out of their anxiety, and not ever having that explained. So it also would make sense that Anna would have a hard time knowing how to connect in terms of like even being able to be aware herself of her anxiety and being this makes a ton of fucking sense that I'm so fucking freaked out because shit has been hard and weird and strange. And I have this person that I love, but that I have no relationship with. And she's the only part of my family that I have, and kind of trying to, which I think sometimes adults find themselves in terms of losing a parent. And then, a lot of times you hear about losing the matriarch or the patriarch of the family. And then the family really has to figure out what roles they're going to play and how they're going to connect to each other. And sometimes we end up seeing this kind of repair work that gets done as adults because we're out, we're kind of out from under the situation that we were in. And so things can kind of develop in that way. But I think what's really hard for Anna is that, well, for both of them, honestly, is that they don't really know how to relate to other people, kind of, period. And then they have to learn how to relate to each other, knowing that they had something before, but not understanding why they don't have it anymore. So I feel like that was the only thing that I was thinking about in terms of anxiety, in terms of and also why, which you guys already talked about, the whole Hans, the Hans situation and just really wanting that and really wanting to feel that way, because feeling bad and feeling alone that's something that, if that's something you felt for a really long time, you want to avoid feeling that way. And the best way to avoid that is to focus on something else or focus on a new relationship. And sometimes those things aren't necessarily a conscious choice that we're making, because sometimes those paths are created when we're growing up, especially if we've grown up in a traumatic situation.
I mean, I think that's a great point about how continuing to rag on the parents, they didn't really model anything different for Anna in terms of how to handle anxiety and stressors. And also with the Hans thing, what kind of triggered for me too, the thought was sometimes when I work with people and they're dating and experiencing this kind of idealization and devaluation, as you put it, Ben, is also saying like, are we attached to this person, or are we attached to the potential of this person and or the change and relief it would bring to you? It's sort of like, are we in love with love kind of idea?
I think having worked with this, I think I can speak on that a little bit, is that it's all of those, but it's also, it creates a key that unlocks a part of themselves that they've always wanted to have, and now can believe that they can have and see an avenue to it and start just enough to invest in it that they feel good and start to develop things on their own. And then they start actualizing in ways that they hadn't been able to before. And that's when the narcissist dumps them. Pow, right there. Because now they don't need the narcissist to feed that in them anymore. And then the power dynamic shifts.
I mean, if you're able to get out from underneath of being in an abusive relationship, that's not necessarily, does it happen that way, but sometimes it can, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes people get stuck, for sure. They're master manipulators.
Yeah. And like we kind of stated, like Anna has the privilege of a support system around her that is actively saving her, really, and pulling her out from under the Hans thing. Because it'd be different if like Elsa totally ran off, or there wasn't an Elsa, and then Hans was all she had.
Well, he locked her in a tower to freeze to death, so he could take power.
Yeah.
I mean, he's definitely the
garbage
for sure. As well as I think their parents, in terms of parents who are unaware of the impact of intergenerational trauma and aren't able to do anything different besides act out of fear. And that unfortunately, when something like that happens, who has to deal with that? The kids. And the kids really have to learn how to figure that out. And I think one of the things that I really love about the second movie, and then we can move on. I know we don't have a lot of time left, is that by them both taking time to take care of themselves in a different way and to kind of like heal and grow a little bit. Like, I think they both would have a lot of work to do left, like, as in terms of me working with either one of them, which we'll get into next, but having a little bit of that happening each for themselves really can help foster their relationship. Because like we talk about a lot of times, if you have work that you need to do for yourself, your relationships can grow and change because you're doing work on yourself. And that's not something, and that's something that we don't get to, really see, but we kind of do see the different ways that they're both struggling, and how that can be another way to repair the relationship, but that you have to take care of yourself first and kind of learn and understand some parts of yourself, which I think we see Elsa kind of, we kind of watch her do that. But and also at the same time, it's also really hard because then she gets stuck, which happens sometimes when she gets stuck in the frozen, whatever bottom thing. I can't remember right now because my brain doesn't work.
In the spirit world, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And how that's really common in terms of healing and growing, of like getting stuck and like needing someone else, like needing some support, which she has, when Anna finally, whatever happens there. So yeah, I think those are the only other things I wanted to say, is that what a beautiful, again, something that Disney doesn't normally do. We don't normally see internal personal growth necessarily. A lot of times it's about a battle that's very external, or it's about whatever,
finding true love,
finding fucking
outside of
true
you.
love, which it's is nonsense.
I don't know, if you lock me in a tower and you give me a library, baby, I'm in.
I mean, okay.
You are such a Ravenclaw.
You know it. You heard it here first. 100%. So with treatment, I'll let you go first, Ben.
Okay, yeah, because I'm gonna do treatment and final thought here, and I'll just splice them together. So Hannah, if you could mark this time for me. And we'll add a break in here. So for treatment for these characters, I think I'm going to go full existential here and person-centered. Normally I would
love that.
I do. I love existential. I have largely I work CBT into the work that I do, but I've started to really hate it because I feel like it just fucking misses it. And I think the thing that you have to do is that with these characters, they've gone through so much growth already. They've been able to experience and grow from trauma and be separated out and forced to enter a situation where they had to accept who they were. They had to reframe how they fit into the world and change how they define both the meaning of themselves and of the world and how their family fits into things and the history of what happened and who they've been brought up their whole lives to be. Throughout the course of this story, we see Anna grow up in the shadow of Elsa and believe that her sister is going to be the queen, and she's just this little light of a person that bounces around feeling like she can just do the good that she does and be who she is and kind of find happiness and love. And she's not too worried about much of anything, whereas Elsa has been brought up to feel like she's going to be the queen and has this weight of the world on her, but she doesn't want it. And then they go through these massive crises where those roles eventually get shifted, where we realize that there's a whole nother place for Elsa to be. And it's okay. It's where she belongs. The universe spoke to her and told her that you actually are this fifth spirit. Your fit is not here in the palace, managing the day-to-day affairs and being connected to people. That is a role that you've never been good at. And it's okay. It's okay. People grow in roles that mean something to them at 5 times the rate they do at things that they don't care about. And it's important to understand that in management and also in therapy, to look at people and go, if you are a person who feels connected to nature, who likes to be more introverted, who does things, it's okay for you to find a role in the world that fits that. And we see beautifully done. Elsa does that. Instead of being like, look, I'm the beautiful figurehead who's supposed to be all of these compassionate things that really my sister is. She is that person and I am not. And they end up changing these roles so that Elsa finds this place where she can be freer and more on her own and connected to the world in a way that makes sense to her. And Anna gets to actualize and realize that she is the one who is actually more of the leader, more of the person-centered person, more of that Hufflepuffy type who loves everybody like me and Shelley here, black and yellow. But that ability to bubble around, be connected to other people, care about other things. We see Anna realize that just because she hasn't been given the title to be that doesn't mean she can't actualize as who she is that way. And as each of these characters realizes and finds their way to be who they feel most comfortable being, we see the most growth out of them. So for me, existentially and person-centered wise, it would be a lot of reinforcing that message and personalizing that and making them feel validated in their choices and working on exploring from the cognitive side, looking for any negative thoughts that keep them stuck in the roles that they felt they were supposed to be in, and letting go of that so that they can be who they feel comfortable in the world being, and letting go of whatever expectations other people had of them to walk into an unknown that becomes a known. Mm-hmm. And with that, I have to get off this recording today, so I'll let my lovely partners and Shelley wrap up for me today. But I just want to say thank you all so much. We've now crossed over 300,000 listens because of you guys. And thank you for listening to season 4 of our show. Mm-hmm. And we look forward to bringing you guys more and more content over the next season, and hope you have a happy holiday season, and we'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm. Bye, Ben. Have fun on your plane. Mm-hmm. So I'll jump in with treatment. So I will come at it, which I haven't really done this in a while, like as a formal child therapist. This is kind of sort of what I used to do, is do parent coaching and family therapy for families in crisis. And typically with there being a quote unquote identified patient as one of the children in the family unit. And so I think where I would like to jump in as a therapist within the situation is right after the event with Anna and Elsa when they were little kids, and do some parent coaching with mom and dad without the kids and then with the kids, in terms of how do we move forward. And so what I would do and what I have done in real life situations like this is, one is work a lot with the parents through their trauma too, of like, how are they feeling? Like, you really have to start with addressing the barriers for the parents. And by barriers, I just mean like whatever emotional reactions are coming up from them. Like, are you scared of your child? Are you scared for your other child due to your own child? What do you have shame about the fact that you are not just scared of your child, but maybe like angry towards them because you're feeling protective of the child that got injured? And are you doing any conscious or unconscious unfair treatment, of your children towards each other because of what happened? Are you thinking differently of your child? So where you kind of have to start, and I touched upon it a bit in the Babadook episode, is any maybe shameful or conscious unconscious feelings you have towards your child that, like I said, are shameful, don't feel good, that maybe feels horrible to say out loud, is that can be the place to start. And then doing a lot of coaching with the parents about their own coping skills for anxiety, like doing a lot of kind of what Ben just said, though, I probably would do a lot of CBT work, cognitive behavioral work of, how do we recognize when we are having a feeling and what coping skills are we modeling for our children and how are we doing that in real time? And so I would probably teach, you can look them up, a bunch of CBT coping skills. There's a lot of concrete ones. I could speak for like 2 hours about all of them, but you could give it a Goog. And what I tell parents, especially when kids are really young, is you have to make sure that you are modeling the reaction and the behaviors that you want to see in your children. You can't be asking them as children to do something that you are not doing as an adult. Like, the kids can't be the most self-actualized people in the house or like the most mature behaving. And so I really ask parents to examine within themselves of like, are you like yelling? Are you running away? Are you shutting down? And is that the behaviors that you want to see in your child? And are those behaviors you're ironically coming in and telling me that you want me to fix in your child? And it's not, like I said, to shame the parents or to do that cliched therapist thing of like, it's the parents' fault why the kids act this way. It really is just, are we having fair expectations of the whole family as a group? Are we asking for unrealistic expectations of our children that we're not even asking of ourselves? And then too, just for the well-being of the parents as individuals, like, do you like the way that you feel? And hopefully what I teach you to model for your kids, you also get a huge benefit from that. And so I think the work I'd have to do would be with the parents until they have some consistency that they're reporting to me about. So like, I am teaching, like when this came up with Elsa, I used this skill and I saw her use it too. And then I might bring Elsa in and like talk about, how are you feeling and what do you want mom and dad to do when you are feeling nervous? What are you still feeling nervous about? And maybe have hard conversations, age appropriately hard conversations about like, what happened? I feel really scared. Like, do you think I'm going to hurt Anna? Like part of that repair work is she might need forgiveness from her parents that she doesn't really have to have, like in the sense of like she shouldn't need forgiveness, I guess is what I mean. But also she might need forgiveness, or she might need to have that conversation of, are you guys scared of me? And so that the repair work might be to shore up that attachment again and to kind of get back onto a common ground of like, we're all on the same team wanting to help you and your sister feel safe and secure at home. Because something inside of you does feel really uncontrollable right now. That doesn't mean that you're bad. That doesn't mean we think you're bad. It just means that there's something different that we need to help you take charge of. And that's okay. And so a lot of it would be normalizing what's going on for Elsa, building up her confidence that her parents are on her side and that she is a good person, a good kid. It's very simplistic, but that's how kids think. I'm a bad kid or I'm a good kid. And so it would be a lot of reassurance kind of stuff. And I would probably want to do some form of family therapy for a while. And not because, like I said, not like what we see in movies with family therapy where we're talking out our problems with each other. It really more is like being a coach, like walking beside them as they try to support their child who is different than them and has different needs, and making sure that they feel confident in their ability to parent a child who needs different things. And it might be quote unquote harder because they do need different stuff and they need coping skills and interactions that are maybe different than Anna. You know, I think we also have a hard time as parents. I say this, I don't have kids, but like, I think when I work with parents, our time not comparing our kids to each other and also comparing our quote unquote easiest child as like the baseline. So like when I do this with Anna, she has no problem with it and be like, they're different people. Like you need to get over that, you know, they're different. And so I would have to, and at some point I probably would also bring Anna in if it was age appropriate. And if she needed that support. Sometimes when I'm working with families and there's a younger sibling who's somewhat impacted by what's going on at home, I will sometimes offer to do like a one-on-one with the younger sibling just to see how they're doing. And I try to be very, I guess, non-leading because you want to be very careful with little kids that you're not projecting your adult experiences onto them and leading them. And it's like when you see people will say when a little kid falls down, don't go, oh my God, are you okay? Because you're projecting the experience onto them and they were like, oh my God, I should be freaked out, and let them decide if they're going to be freaked out about falling down. And so when I work with like little siblings, I'll be like, hey, so I know you know that I'm working with your older sister and your parents and that some stuff's gone on at home that I know you know. Do you have any questions for me? Or do you have anything that you want to talk about? Just the two of us. And I can answer some of those questions if I can. And so I really try to lay an open floor and I don't make any assumptions about how the kid in front of me is feeling. I really try. I'm very careful with that when I work with family members in these kind of scenarios, because like, I don't want to be like, God, that must've been really scary when that happened, because maybe she's not. And I don't want to make her think like, oh shit, should I be scared? And then that's something her little brain will spiral about after meeting me. And so I think that's what the work I'd want to do with this family is really guide parents working with Elsa to normalize her experience, to destigmatize her experience, and to help them learn and teach coping skills. Because also, like, unless you are a parent who is a therapist, or even if you're a therapist, you're not necessarily a therapist in your personal life, you don't really know how to do these things either. So it's like seeing an expert for anything, you know. You shouldn't, I think we should just know how to do these things. And we don't. That's why our whole job exists as therapists, is people don't innately know how to do this stuff. And so it's okay to have to reach out to an external support to coach you through parenting when parenting needs to change. So those are my treatment thoughts. I don't know, Hannah, if you want to go.
Sure. I shouldn't take too long. I think, so I would be treating them like after the second movie. Probably.
Anna and Elsa?
Yeah, Anna and Elsa as adults. And one of the things that I think I would do, especially since Brittany, you talk so much about family therapy, I think what I would want to do is just do therapy with the two of them as adults, and really try to, sometimes, especially if you come from a family where there are secrets that are being kept, whatever those secrets might be, sometimes it can be hard to share those things with each other because we can be worried that the other person might have too big of a reaction, or like whatever the case might be. So I would want to work with them as adults to kind of help connect and repair, and also grieve some of the, most of their relationship has been completely out of their control. Like they had adults dictating what they were going to do and not do. And I think that a big part of helping them feel connected and have a healthy attachment to each other would also be them kind of experiencing and talking about some of the things that did happen, or just connecting memories in terms of any of this, because also like Anna's memory was wiped at some point. So it's also just kind of like, but Elsa remembers all of those things happening. And sometimes that can help clarify for the other sibling, like, hey, so this is actually what happened. And then you came back and it was like you didn't know what had happened at all. So, or I didn't see you after that and had no idea what happened to you. So so I think that I would really want to work on with them as adults of like grieving some of the experiences, grieving their relationship, and maybe even in some way grieving their parents. And also, just talking about like, are you angry? Are you frustrated about what happened? And so it would be kind of like different than doing family therapy in terms of having like everybody involved, but really just talking about them and helping them create a relationship that has healthy boundaries around how they talk about those things, and helping them just have practice with that. Kind of what you said, Brittany, of kind of like it's sitting next to them and kind of being like, okay, like how can we continue to repair and foster your relationship? Not necessarily like couples therapy exactly, but something that's a little bit different in terms of, which I think I've talked about in a lot of different episodes, in terms of helping the family reconnect with each other and figure out how to have a healthy way to talk about the things that have happened in the past so that they can move forward together. So I think that's what I would want to do. Shelley, do you have any questions or anything you want to add, or anything for me and Brittany in terms of this portion? Or I just want to
have your own expertise.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if there's anything that you want to bring to this situation.
It's been so long. I worked in 2005 doing treatment of kids, so I'm just going to defer to you all. It's been a really long time.
Okay. And I do think, kind of hopping on what you said, Hannah, is I do think it's good for people to be aware that couples therapy, I'm just going to say it like that, like therapy with two people, basically, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can be friends. It can be siblings, adult siblings. I think people feel really weird. I noticed that people will feel weird. Like, can you do therapy with two siblings? So like, yeah, of course I can. I can do therapy with two human beings that have thoughts, like regardless. And I don't think I think it's that weird way that we value romantic adult relationships over everything else when there's so many other relationships in our life. I mean, My Favorite Murder, one of the biggest podcasts that exists, the podcast host on that went to couples therapy. And they talk about that on their show because they became business partners in work and in their livelihood, and how they needed help communicating with each other before it dramatically impacted their relationship. And I think that's so beautiful. All right, so we can shift to final thoughts. We've talked a lot, Shelley, so I'm going to throw it to you. What are your final thoughts about Frozen 1 and 2?
I would say, which I already sort of alluded to earlier, I'm glad that these exist in the world for kids. Growing up, my Disney movies were not as insightful or, introspective, thinking about your inner workings of your mind. My big princess was Ariel, who gave up her voice to be with a man.
And her legs. Well, she gave up her physicality.
Yeah. And so that was who, and, later it was Belle, but like that when I was growing up, or like Cinderella, Snow White, that were all very much these heterosexual sort of heteronormative things. So while Frozen has some of that, it's more about sisterhood. It's more about dealing with this trauma of the parents and then having positive relationships. So, I'm glad that my daughter took to this, as most little girls do. I think that it's really positive, and I have endured watching them many, many times. But each time I watch it, I'm still impressed with the story, even with the problematic issues with the parents. It's still very girl power in a way that I think some of the other Disney movies have not been.
For sure. And I can just piggyback on that as well. One, I want to thank you, Shelley, for watching it for the 101st time for this podcast.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure many more for your little baby. And Agreed. I remember when I saw Frozen in theaters, the gasp in the movie theater when Hans goes to kiss her and then he says psych, and everyone, like, you could feel everyone's like breath freeze in their bodies. They're like, what? Because that is the narrative we've been taught by Disney movies our whole lives growing up, especially if you're like an 80s, 90s baby. Like, that's like all you got fed. Mm-hmm. And so it did feel revolutionary at the time that Hans was the bad guy and that Anna found true love through her sibling love and not from a man that she literally just met. And I do, like I said, it is also an odd Disney movie in that it has a big blockbuster sequel that also doesn't have, like, Kristoff, it does the proposing, but that's not the central thrust of the movie. You know, the central thrust is still Anna and Elsa's independent actualization, and it ends with Elsa being her own little like wood nymph sort of situation, like her own little like leader of the fairies kind of in the woods. And so I do appreciate, I'm not a Frozen girl, as I was saying before we recorded, but I do appreciate the themes of the movie. I know we've been using a lot of like gender terms, but I could see this as anyone, regardless of your gender identity expression, feeling really seen by this movie, and that but being raised in like a patriarchal society as someone who is feminine presenting or identifying as female, feeling like there is another alternative. Like, it's really interesting that Elsa has no love interest whatsoever, not even a hint of a whisper of a love interest, not a dude who's like sniffing around her. Like, she really is doing quite literally her own thing this whole movie. And there is no part of her that is romantically inclined or sexual at all. And that's such a different thing than any other Disney property. And so it is really interesting. And it does speak to I'm curious how much that is a conscious part of why it's so beloved, or if kids are just like, she shoots ice out of her hands and that's dope as hell. And I love that Let It Go song. It's like, drugs for kids. And I guess also my final thought is I think the music is better in the second movie. I mean, fight me if you want, but Into the Unknown is better than Let It Go. I don't like Let It Go. That's my hot take of this episode. I think it's a whatever song. I feel like I felt lackluster the first time I heard it and the 800th time I heard it. Mm-hmm. And then Into the Unknown, I was like, this is a banger. This is a bop. I was like, I love that. Like that whole thing. I'm into it. I love it. It's very like ethereal, which I love. And I love Kristoff's little boy band in sync, it's
perfect
Boys to Men moment, whereas, when he's singing in the woods by himself and feeling insecure, like that is very funny to me. I also don't like Olaf. And I know that's also a hot take. My second hot take is Olaf. I could take him or leave him. I don't like those Disney characters that are like screaming how funny they are to your face. I'm not a huge fan of. So if he melted, I'd be fine. But I also know he's very beloved. So those are my two hot takes for this episode. I'll throw it to you, Hannah, to wrap it up.
Great. Thanks. I really like the second movie. There hasn't ever been a second film that has been made that actually told us more of the story, which we kind of don't get at all in Frozen 1. And actually, I remember consistently being very underwhelmed by the first film, especially just in terms of they create this huge conflict and then just like magic at the end, she just figures it the fuck out in like 2 seconds, which is, insane. But also not unlike other Disney movies. Like that's not exactly, completely inaccurate. Or even like Wizard of Oz, she just figures it the fuck out. So I really like the second film. I really enjoy the second film. I do love that song. I like the music better in the second film. And I really just like, again, that this movie exists. I think we have a long way to go. And Disney still owes us a lot more than what they, give us.
It's two still pretty privileged white girls. So we still got a ways to go.
Who are, both have blue eyes and blonde hair and fucking everything else. So, and have, tiny figures and blah, 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 blah.
Gigantic little doe eyes.
Yeah. So So, I mean, they still owe us a lot, but I feel like this, again, I'm happy that these exist. I think it is a beautiful story. And I think it gives us something that we haven't, that we don't usually get from Disney, which I think we've all already said. And I think watching these as adults, Frozen 2, like I'll probably watch again. Frozen 1, probably not. I just don't have any reason to. I also don't have any children, but have many.
So we're freed from the chains of Frozen.
many nieces and nephews who just love all the characters. I love Olaf probably because I love Josh Gad. So, yeah, he's a lovely person. Mm-hmm. He seems like it anyway, since I know him personally. I don't know why I'm talking about this. So I think, thank you so much. I don't really have anything else. I don't know if either one of you have anything else to add.
Go ahead.
I think I just want to thank Shelley. Thank you so much for doing this with us. I know I was like missing for half of it. But it was really great to be able to do an episode with you. And
where can people find you? Where can people find you, Shelley? Where do you want to be found, Shelley?
Professionally, the Department of Victim Studies at Sam Houston State University website, and then at Dr. Clevenger on Twitter.
Cool.
And I loved being on here. Love you all. Love the show.
Same. Love you. And and we're, I have to do our own little, propping ourselves up. So you can find us at Instagram and Facebook at Popcorn Psychology, Twitter at popcorn_psych. You can find us. We have a Patreon, which we are horrible at plugging. If you want to support us, this all comes out of our own pockets. So patreon.com, if you look for Popcorn Psychology on there. We also have a TeePublic account. If you want merch from us, we have a varied amounts of colors now of our t-shirts, not just the black and red that you see in our logo. If you're wanting something different, Ben's a big fan of what he's named the Joker style one, which is purple and green. We didn't even realize when we made it, or we wouldn't. We tease Ben too much. We have gotten your feedback, people that were too mean to Ben. And I will say, I'm ignoring it. Just joking. But
yeah, same. He's fine.
We love you, Ben. And so you can always email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. That's the best way to find us if you want to ask us questions or give us recommendations for movies you'd like to hear of. And that is a wrap on season 4. We will see you all in the new year with season 5 of Popcorn Psychology. Happy holidays.